There's a particular moment that happens in offices now, usually during meetings. Someone says something carefully, not brilliantly, not badly either, just carefully. And everyone immediately understands what's actually being communicated isn't the idea. It's the risk management around the idea because modern workplaces have created a strange kind of employee, not lazy, not disengaged, not incompetent, just emotionally cautious. You can often recognize them by how measured they've become. The delayed reply, the diplomatic wording, the small pause before speaking, as if every sentence is being mentally checked for consequences before it leaves the mouth. And the uncomfortable part is most of them didn't start their careers that way. Usually they arrived enthusiastic, open, visible. Then, slowly, something changed. Not dramatically, quietly. A manager dismisses an idea in front of the team with a smile that sounds polite enough to deny being insulting. Someone else gets credit for work they clearly didn't do. An email is ignored for 3 days, then suddenly answered after somebody senior is copied in. A joke lands slightly wrong in a meeting, and the atmosphere changes for just long enough to make someone remember it for months. None of these moments seem important individually. That's why they accumulate so effectively, because modern office culture rarely humiliates people openly anymore. It edits them subtly, one uncomfortable interaction at a time. And eventually, employees begin adapting themselves around emotional risk, not around ambition, around survival. You can see it happen in very small behaviors. Someone who used to volunteer ideas now waits to see who speaks first. Someone who once challenged bad decisions now says, happy to support whichever direction the team prefers. Not because they agree, because they've learned disagreement creates visibility, and visibility can become dangerous, especially in workplaces where professionalism increasingly means emotional self erasure. The strange thing is, most organizations still talk about authenticity constantly. Bring your whole self to work, speak openly, collaborate honestly, but employees quickly learn there are acceptable emotions and unacceptable ones. Confidence is acceptable. Stress is manageable if it remains productive. Enthusiasm is useful when it improves output. But disappointment, resentment, exhaustion, quiet humiliation, those emotions must remain professionally invisible. So people become skilled at performing emotional stability while privately deteriorating underneath it. And after enough years, the performance becomes automatic. That's when professionalism starts changing identity itself. Not immediately, usually slowly. Someone stops speaking naturally in meetings. Their language becomes strangely neutral, carefully polished, emotionally non threatening. Even outside work, they begin editing themselves instinctively. They apologize before expressing opinions. They soften every criticism. They rehearse simple conversations in advance because prolonged emotional monitoring doesn't always stay at work. Sometimes it follows people home. That's the uncomfortable part. Some workplaces don't burn people out loudly, they train people to become emotionally smaller over time. And often the most competent employees adapt fastest because competence creates awareness. They notice which personalities get promoted, which people become socially protected, which behaviors quietly trigger exclusion. So they learn the system emotionally, not officially, socially. The employee who receives warm responses in meetings despite mediocre ideas. The manager whose criticism arrives disguised as concern. The colleague who says, just circling back on this, with a level of passive aggression so refined everyone recognizes it instantly while pretending not to. British workplaces are especially skilled at this. Conflict rarely arrives directly, it arrives hidden beneath politeness, a slightly colder tone, an invitation not extended, a compliment that somehow feels corrective, And because everything remains technically professional, people often feel guilty for being affected by it. They tell themselves they're overthinking, too sensitive, too emotional. Meanwhile, their nervous system is adapting to low level social threat every day. You see it in meetings where people smile while gripping pens too tightly, in kitchens where conversations stop for half a second when someone walks in emails rewritten 6 times to sound calm enough, in employees sitting silently after calls, staring at screens for a moment longer than necessary before moving again. Emotional exhaustion often looks professional from the outside. That's why it becomes difficult to recognize. The employee still arrives on time, still replies politely, still delivers work. But internally, something has changed. They no longer think about growth, they think about exposure. How visible should I be? How much honesty is safe here? How emotionally neutral do I need to become today? And eventually, many professionals stop asking whether they're respected. They start asking how invisible they need to become to stay comfortable. That shift changes people quietly. Because humans are not designed to continuously separate personality from survival. But offices increasingly reward exactly that skill, especially large organizations. You'll notice the employees who survive longest are often not the loudest or smartest, they're the most emotionally adaptable. They know when enthusiasm becomes threatening, when honesty becomes risky, when silence becomes protection, and silence eventually becomes a professional identity, one built around emotional predictability, no difficult reactions, no visible frustration, no excessive vulnerability, just controlled professionalism, even during moments that genuinely hurt, like watching someone less capable receive recognition because they're socially easier to manage, or realizing your ideas are only accepted after someone senior repeats them later, or hearing phrases like, we just need someone with a slightly different energy when everyone in the room understands what's actually being implied. These moments seem small, but people remember them physically, long after the meeting ends. That's why many professionals become emotionally detached before they become physically burned out. The withdrawal starts internally first. They contribute less emotionally, speak less spontaneously, laugh more carefully. Eventually, some employees become so psychologically guarded they struggle to remember who they were before the adaptation began. And strangely, modern workplaces often reward that transformation. The emotionally restrained employee appears composed, reliable, low maintenance. Meanwhile, internally, they may feel permanently tense because emotional masking consumes energy quietly. Particularly when someone spends years performing emotional balance they no longer genuinely feel. You can sometimes recognize it late in the evening. An employee finally alone after work, sitting in silence longer than usual before turning the key in the door, not exhausted physically, emotionally compressed, as if they spent the entire day managing invisible tensions nobody officially acknowledged. And perhaps the most psychologically confusing part is this: many people adapt successfully. Their career progresses, their salary improves, their performance reviews remain strong. Externally, everything appears stable, but internally, they become increasingly disconnected from their natural emotional responses until professionalism stops feeling like behavior and starts feeling like personality replacement. That's why some employees leave organizations without dramatic stories, no explosive conflict, no public breakdown, just a quiet, internal recognition that they no longer recognize themselves inside the role. Because toxic workplaces rarely destroy people loudly. Usually, they edit people slowly, one hesitation at a time, one careful sentence at a time, one emotionally restrained meeting at a time, until eventually the employee becomes highly professional and emotionally absent from their own life Most people notice too late. By then, the adaptation already feels normal, and perhaps that's the most unsettling part of modern work. The most dangerous workplaces are often not the openly cruel ones. They're the environments that slowly convince emotionally intelligent people that disappearing carefully is what professionalism looks like.